Hi everyone. For our second episode today, we have a local Durham community member who's also the co-owner of Jireh Family Farm speaking with us today. Emmanuel, could you tell us the story behind the farm and its name?
Yeah, so the name actually comes from an old Hebrew story of a man who was promised to have a son by God, and the man was old. He was like almost 99 years old and still didn't have a son. And finally he had a son, and when the boy was about 13 years old, the same God that promised him that he was going to have a son told him to go up to a mountain and sacrifice him on an altar, which is kind of crazy. Well, the man was obedient, and he went up the mountain with his son, and he was about to sacrifice his only son. And just before he did it, an angel came and said, "Stop. Now I know that you fear God, and now I'm going to bless you and bless you and bless you." And when he looked to his left, he saw this old ram or a goat that was stuck in a bush. And so he took his son off the altar. And instead of sacrificing his son, he sacrificed the goat, and he did a burnt offering to God. And it says, "On this mountain, God will provide." And that name in Hebrew is Jireh, Jireh. And so we picked that name just because we started off with nothing, and we had a desire to be able to create clean meat and produce for our own family and also for the community. But we didn't really have a lot of money. We didn't have a lot of knowledge. We didn't have anything, but we just took step by step, little by little. And 5 years later, we have chickens and we have pigs and we have rabbits and we have goats and we have, dogs that have Great Pyrenees livestock, guardian dogs that have puppies, and we have gardens. And so now we're able to supply our own family with food, but more than that, now we're able to supply the community with wholesome meats and vegetables.
That's amazing. I really love the story behind the name. If you don't mind me asking, what motivated you to purchase the land? And what year did you purchase the land?
We purchased it in 2016, and we started the farm in 2017. My wife and I were real estate investors, and we're always looking for properties. And we found this. My wife actually found it. Immediately, we came out here, ran out here, and took a look at it, and we just saw the potential. It needed a lot of work. It needed a full gut job in the house. The land needed to be improved. The pool was not working. It was just a mess. But we were able to get into the property, completely strip the house down and redo it, everything from roof to windows to gutters to paint to new flooring, taking out walls, putting in walls, changing rooms around, redoing the kitchen, redoing the bedrooms, and then outside, taking out trees, moving the land, fixing the pool, creating gardens and things like that. So little by little, we've been able to do these things. And really the impetus of the farm was not just because we just wanted to grow things. My wife had a brother, and her brother came down with cancer. And my wife is a registered nurse, and my brother-in-law would send my wife articles on the foods, and discovered that he felt very strongly that it was the foods that he was eating led to his condition, because he only ate fast food, never
I
ate
see. I
vegetables. I
see.
mean, never. And so
Yeah.
um, because of that, it kind of just went into that. She started doing research and she said, "You know what? I just don't have confidence in the food in the grocery stores anymore. And the only way that I can have confidence in the food that we're eating is by growing it ourselves." And so that's where we are today.
Wow, that's a lot of hard work, but it really sounds worth it.
Yeah.
So is there any history of farming in your family? Who taught you, or did you just kind of start from the beginning and continue?
Yeah, great question. So I didn't have much farming or agricultural background, but my wife grew up in rural Virginia, on a tobacco farm, and she saw her dad
Mm.
raise certain crops and things like that. So, having chickens and having pigs and having gardens was not, foreign to her. And quite frankly, having, a little home garden wasn't foreign to me either. But I think the scale of the livestock that we have was new.
Yeah.
And really we just learned by trial by error. And so, we went on YouTube, we went to conferences, we read articles, we tried certain things. Sometimes it would fail, but we wouldn't give up, and we just kept going. And so now we've been able to learn. And so we're in our fifth year of farming, and we know a lot more than we did when we started, and we have a lot more to go in terms of learning.
That's great. I think a lot of people could use that same mentality of trial and error. So when purchasing your hand-raised meats and eggs, a customer may hear the terms thrown around like free range, permaculture, grass-fed. Would you mind explaining what those mean?
So our farm is not a certified organic farm, but we use the best practices in growing vegetables and growing meats, and not adding any pesticides or any herbicides to our ground. We don't put fertilizers on our ground. All of our things that we use are natural. There's natural companion herbs and companion things that you can do to protect from insects and bugs and things like that eating your garden. There's things that you can treat your animals with naturally, whether it's apple cider vinegar or diatomaceous earth to be able to help with mites and little worms and things like that without having to use any kind of medication at all. So grass-fed basically is the connotation is to beef. Grass-fed beef is good because the animal grows slower. But when we think about steaks, when you look at a steak, you're like, "Ooh, this is a good steak." It has that beautiful marbling, and let's be honest, that marbling is fat, and you're not going to get a lot of fat through grass only. So you have like this trade-off. You could have a 100% grass-fed animal. It takes a lot longer to grow because for them to grow to get to that size, and there's not going to be a lot of fat content. But if you want it for stews or for roast, you don't want a lot of fat. But most Americans, when they think of beef, the pinnacle cut is your steaks. And those steaks, you want to have some of that marbling because it has some of that fat. So a lot of times what farmers should do is they'll have their cows on grass, and then towards the last 30 to 45 days of its life, they start incorporating a little bit of grain, a little bit of corn in, not a lot. They hand feed them, keeping them nice and friendly, just to be able to kind of supplement their diet so that when they go to the market, the steaks look presentable for the average American to eat. So grass-fed only is not necessarily like, oh, I don't want to eat it. It's not 100% grass-fed, because you may not like the taste, and you may not like the quantity of beef. So generally what we do is we work with companion farmers when we do our beef is we'll have grass fed all the way up, but they're mixing in grain towards the end of their life just to add a little bit of more girth and flavor into the beef. So when you're having your hamburger, when you're having your meatloaf, or when you're having your steak, you can appreciate that. Permaculture is basically is more for pigs and chickens. And permaculture just means is that you're doing land rotation, putting your pigs in the woods or in a forest, which is a natural habitat, and they're eating grubs and worms, and they're eating branches and roots, and they're eating leaves and things like that. They're leaving their waste, but you have it in a large enough area that there's no smell, and you're rotating those pigs to new areas, allowing what they leave in the ground to go back into the earth to be able to settle, break down, and then bring forth new life. So essentially, if you do it right, your land is continually getting better and richer and more vibrant every year when you're rotating your pigs in a permaculture type of environment. And then lastly, free range chickens. Generally, that's when people are talking about. And free range chickens basically have the opportunity to pick and to hunt for their food. We have free range chickens for our eggs, and we call it free range chicken also for our meat as well. But for the protection of the animal, we either put a big net over them, and we move them from place to place so they have natural grasses and herbs and bugs and things to eat in addition to their high protein diet. So they're not in cages. Some of you guys may know about battery cages, and literally have a chicken in a box as big as a shoebox, and the chicken never leaves. It's under a canopy, lights are always on, and all they do is just feed it, and it just sits there and eats and eats and eats and eats and gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it goes to processing. Our processing time is about the same as a processor like a Purdue or something like that. But because we allow them to run around, they're getting energy, exercise, they're healthier, they have more of a diverse diet. And because of that, they're happier chickens, they're healthier chickens, and the healthier the chicken is, the more healthy the meat is going to be when you consume it.
Agreed. So by doing these methods, it's kind of like a a mutually beneficial relationship for the land and the animals and our bodies. So,
It's supposed to be.
yeah, yeah. Since your organization isn't certified organic, and you kind of touched on this already, what other practices do you all take to keep the farm ethical and sustainable?
One of the things that we do is a lot of rotational. We do
Mhm.
rotational grazing and also rotational farming. So even in our small garden, which is probably, let's say, 50 feet by 30 feet, not huge, but it's about 1,500 square feet or so. In that garden, what we do is we make sure that every year we're rotating our crops around. And then we're also doing companion gardening. So there's certain herbs and there's certain plants that work well with others. For instance, so we planted cabbage this fall. Well, what we did is in between the cabbage, we planted onions between the cabbage. And the reason why is because when the onions are growing, they actually repel bugs. So the same bugs and beetles that would be eating the leaves of the cabbage are repelled by the onions that are grown with them. So that's an example of companion farming. And then also with our animals, we rotate them as well. We want to make sure they have clean spaces. And another thing that we're really trying to do is really protect our watershed as well. The way the topography of our farm is things kind of slope downward. And so what we're trying to do is to try to create areas to protect the water table so our runoff is runoff that's clean. One of the things that I didn't know about until I got into farming is that, you may go to a farm and you notice a whole patch of land that has never been cut. And you
Yes.
think, why hasn't this grass been cut? Well, the reason why is that the grass, the length of the grass, a lot of people don't realize this, but the same length of the grass that you see above the ground is the same length of the roots beneath the ground. And the more roots that you have, the more you're able to hold water when it rains, and so you're able to eliminate erosion and runoff. And so those are some of the practices that we try to do to be able to harvest not just fruits and vegetables, but harvest the water and keep it on the property to be able to nourish the ground and keep it safe.
Okay. And what is your perspective of the industrialized poultry industry? Why do you believe it's
Ooh.
harmful for the animals as well as the environment?
Wow. Well, I see the purpose behind it. I mean, if it wasn't industrialized farming and everyone had to get their chicken for myself or other farmers, the price of chicken would be almost unattainable for a lot of lower income
Yeah.
people. If we look around right now, chicken it proliferates in terms of our diet. It's at every restaurant, every fast food, every chicken sandwich, every chicken biscuit. It's all over the place. And the reason why is because of development of this one particular breed called a Cornish cross, and
Mhm.
these type of battery type of processes that they're able to heighten and quicken the processing of chicken. The problem is that when you sacrifice your quantity over your quality, and that's this balance that we in society always have to be monitoring, because what happens is even though United States has literally double the amount of food than people in this nation, the only nation in the world that has twice as much food available than
Wow.
people to eat it, the quality of the food has gone down. And so what happens is that we're consuming food at higher rates than anyone else in the nation, but you see our waistline, you see how we are looking. And the reason why is that if it doesn't provide the adequate nutrients, your body is starving for more. So your quantities are getting bigger, but you're getting less in terms of the vital nutrients that you need in your body. Right. So that's a struggle that we have. In terms of animals, in terms of the environment, yeah, when we're trying to raise, you know, 60,000 chickens on a 10-acre farm, and you have 10,000 chickens in each of your hen houses, the ammonia, the pollutants, just the amount of waste that's being accumulated is one that is unnatural. And so the ground can't handle that amount of waste being put in. And so there's lagoons and all sorts of things that we try to create to help and to mitigate some of these situations. My thing is this: if the according to just economics 101, the more of a product there is in supply, the less the price is going to be. So my my encouragement is that regardless of how much land you have, if your backyard is as big as a dining room table, or you have a large backyard. If everyone grows a little bit of food, there'll be more products. And if there's more products, it drives the price of products down. And if it drives the price of products down, that means even the poorest among us can get fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, and yes, even fresh meat.
Yeah, I like how you put that. In addition to the meat and free range eggs you sell, I heard your family also places an emphasis on educating others so more people can understand the meaning behind farm to table experiences. Could you tell
Yeah.
me more about your youth farm camp coming up this summer?
Yeah, so we're really excited about this. This is our third year. We believe it or not, and that sounds crazy, but we started this farm in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. I remember, I'll never forget, my wife came home and she said, "Hey, Emmanuel, guess what? Durham Parks and Recs canceled all of their activities for summer." And I'm like, "Wow, that's crazy." And she says, "You know what we should do? We should start a farm." And it was like, wow, we do exactly the opposite of what everyone else is doing. But what we saw is that with online and virtual learning, you had students from the ages of 5 years old all the way up to 18 years old stuck behind a computer inside, isolated from people, isolated from being outside. And we felt like there was an emotional toll on students across the nation. And one way that we felt that we were able to help with that is to get kids outside. When you're outside, you can be socially distanced. You're getting vitamin D. You're able to run. You're able to interact. You're able to get your hands in the dirt, get those positive microbes, and really help not just physically but also mentally. And so we started that in 2020, and we do everything from gardening. We do planting. We do arts and crafts. We have pool time. So on the property, we have a big old pool, in-ground pool. So we have pool time. We do field games, everything from tug of war to capture the flag. We'll do blueberry picking, scavenger hunts in the woods. We're feeding animals, collecting eggs, learning about the pigs, holding baby chicks and baby bunnies, and playing with goats and things like that. So all those things, it really helps individuals and participants, especially these kids, really gain an appreciation of where their food comes from, how long it takes for these things to grow. It brings sobriety to when you go to a restaurant and food is slid in front of you. Where does this food come from? How long does it take for that leg of chicken to become a leg of chicken? And when you have that understanding, you tend not to waste food when you understand where it comes from and how long it takes to be developed to be able to come to your table.
Wow, I would have loved to participate in something like that during the pandemic.
Yeah.
What do you think are the devastating repercussions of unequal food access?
Well, I mean, we're looking at health first. If you don't have access or you don't create the access, then you don't have it. I mean, if a person, let's put it this, if you have school available, public school available, but you choose not to go to school, or you choose only go every other day, or you choose not to do your homework, or you choose not to study, you're not going to gain the information that is afforded to you. Um, I struggle with some of the phrases like food insecurity, and then also food deserts, especially food deserts, because our property could have been a food desert, but we chose to use the land that we have to be able to create food. And in this grand scheme of things, when you think of farming, 4 acres is not a tremendous amount of land. Now, in an urban area, that sounds like a huge amount. But when you talk about farms that are 20, 40, 120, 300, 400 acres of farming, 4 acres is pretty minuscule. But what we just try to do is use what we have, whatever we have, and try to be an example and to inspire others that regardless of what you have, you can create small amounts of food and self-reliance for yourself. And so our focus is not so much focusing on what we don't have or the inequalities, but try to make those inequalities equalities by using the power of people and individuals and communities to come together and to be able to say, hey, we have a problem here, we have a lack here. Let's see if we can solve the problem on our own.
I love how you're trying to create a solution to this problem that we're seeing across communities all across America.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of going back, you guys host that youth summer farm camp. Do you think generally there should be a stronger focus about children's relationship with food from a young age, maybe seen in the form of creating gardens at elementary schools?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And not just gardens. I think sometimes we think about farming, we think about, fruits and vegetables. But I mean, a lot of people eat meat, right? A lot of people eat chicken. A lot of people will go to a Waffle House, or they'll go to their favorite restaurant and they'll have two eggs with, hash browns and toast. And so I think that we even really need to understand where that comes from. Holding a chicken, understanding what it takes for a chicken to produce an egg, what it's made out of, what's the nutrients that a chicken needs to do that, how long a chicken lives, how long does it take for a chicken to produce its first egg, what is the sexual maturity of a chicken, right? And the relationship between chickens and roosters, how much space they need, how amazing they are that when they are out free ranging, they know exactly the nutrients that they need and they go and find exactly what they need, whether it's grit or whether it's protein in a bug or whether it's um, live omega-3 fatty acids that are in grass. They find it on their own. And I think sometimes you just marvel when you see that. And then also there's such a deep appreciation. Look, when you sit down, if you had a garden, you had chickens, and you had some pigs or whatever, and you sat down and you literally had fried chicken from your own farm, greens from your own farm, corn from your own farm, mashed potatoes from your own farm. When you sit down before that, there is a deep, deep respect and reflection over that dinner than any other place if you go to Golden Corral or any other place, because you produced it with your own hand. And there's also this a reverence of protein because you knew that animal died so that you could live.
Yeah, I completely agree. And let me see. How do you think local farmers like yourself could better reach out to marginalized communities, including people of color and indigenous peoples, in order for them to achieve greater access to healthy food?
I think this is already happening. We participate in the Black Farmers Market, and it goes through spring, summer, and fall.
Where is
And not
that?
only that, so that is it's in two locations. They rotate. So last year was in the Golden Belt off Main Street in near downtown Durham, and it was once a month there, and then it was once a month out in Southeast Raleigh. And
Mm.
so these areas are specifically positioned. These markets are specifically positioned within walking area the underserved community, right on bus lines. And not only that, they've taken a step further and they created a SNAP program. So people are able to use their SNAP dollars to be able to buy vegetables, to be able to buy fruits, watermelons, meat that we offer. So I think the opportunities are already there. I think that more exposure would help, so more people know about these type of opportunities. But I think that they've already been emerging, and they'll continue to grow as the demand grows.
Yeah. So, considering how cold it is this time of the year, what vegetables are in season right now? And
Woo!
what's your favorite dish to cook with said
Oh
ingredient?
my goodness! So I'm staring at my garden right now. Now, believe it or not, there's snow all over it.
Oh my
But
gosh.
literally before I got on this call with you, I literally went outside with my scissors and I had some dino kale. And even though it's completely covered with snow and all bent over and frozen, I was able to snip off two plants, come up, wash them, dice them up, and be able to saute kale. And I'm doing that with spicy sauces right now and a little
Mm,
bit more of a diced tomato. I'm going to put a little bit of heavy cream in it, macaroni, and steam that down and have this
wow,
amazing Italian dish.
that
So
sounds
that's what I'm having.
delicious.
Yeah, that's what I'm having for lunch. But it's just an example of how we planted these crops in September and October, and even with the weather being how it is, they're still able to survive. So right now we have
Mm.
a college no wait a collard cabbage hybrid. I still have some plants out there. I have some Brussels sprouts that are growing, or at least trying to grow. I have some cabbage that I've given away to some of our customers. We have some kale. Believe it or not, I have two more heads of broccoli that I've yet to snap off either.
Oh
So in
my.
years past, during the winter, we've done nothing. We just basically covered over and let the garden sleep. That's what we call it. But this
Mhm.
year I said, you know what, I'm gonna see what I can do. And so we went in the fall heavy and planted some things because my desire is that year round we're able to eat out of our own backyard. And so I'm grateful to be able to do that. And so I love making, I love making, oh yeah, I love taking a broccoli and steaming it in and using some of our pork, using some beef and doing a Korean beef bowl or Korean pork bowl, and then having my steamed broccoli next to it with rice. So that's one of the things that are pretty easy that I like to make.
Yeah, I actually do something similar for dinner. Like my mom and
Yeah.
I love getting broccoli, melting some butter, eating it with some local roasted chicken. It's a great
Yeah.
combination.
It's awesome.
So for your final question, if you were speaking to a classroom full of students, what message would you give them to spark their interest in the sustainable agriculture industry?
I would remind them that the first occupation that man ever took on is agriculture. Agriculture, not just in terms of growing food and managing food, and doing gardens and providing food, but also in terms of animals as well. And so remembering that that is what sustains us, and the more people participate in that particular industry, whether it's professionally or just doing it on the side, the more food there's going to be for our people, the more we'll be able to share our bounty, the more we'll be able to give to our neighbors. I mean, imagine if every single person in Durham had, I don't care if it's a bucket or their back porch or whatever, everyone grew tomatoes. Everyone. Can you imagine what the price of tomatoes would be in the grocery store?
Yeah.
It'd be almost nothing,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that means the poorest among us can go and get 4 tomatoes for 50 cents, right? Because there's so much. If everyone had, if your HOA allowed, if you were able to do and you had your own 4 to 5 chickens, and you had a little coop and giving me a little scraps at the end, because chickens are omnivores, they eat everything. And you get a little scraps, you take care of them, you love on them, you can name them, and all of a sudden you're getting your 2 to 3 eggs a day. I mean, imagine what the price of eggs would be like.
It would
Right?
become so
So
much more affordable and accessible.
it does, but not only that, then you're able to share with people. I mean, when I'm growing cabbage out here and I have a customer comes, I can say, hey, I want to give you a gift. I can run the garden, just snap off their head and say, hey, here you go, I just want you to have this along with your chicken tonight. I mean, so it spurs so much camaraderie and community. And again, most of our fellowship happens around the dinner table. And what is at the dinner table is food. And so if we're able to share food and share stories, we're able to build more community with one another.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel.
You're welcome.
And that wraps up our second episode of the week.